Welcome to the Healthy Home Show. I'm your host, Fernanda Firman, Healthy Home Architect.
Hey everybody, I'm Eric, Healthy Home Contractor.
And today, as you see, I'm interviewing Eric. So a lot of you guys have asked me, have sent us emails and messages asking for us to be on the show as well. So we decided that I was going to be interviewing Eric and answer some of the questions that you guys have sent us on the messages. So thank you for being here today and listening to us. And I'm going to read Eric's biography, and I'm going to dive into the questions. Eric, a healthy home contractor, has been working in the building industry for over 20 years. He has worked for well-known companies in residential, commercial, and military projects. His authority comes from being able to successfully identify and remove multiple sources of toxins in his own home, as well as hundreds of his clients' homes, including air, water, building materials, EMF, and mold. Eric created a line of water filtration systems to fulfill his own needs, and after many requests, he decided to make it available to the public 5 years ago. After Fernanda, his wife, a healthy home architect, got extremely ill from environmental toxins, they decided to bring awareness to others in a broader way, and he's now the co-host of the Healthy Home Show. Eric and Fernanda work together to help families and entrepreneurs achieve optimal health, more energy, focus, and productivity by creating non-toxic homes and workspaces. Welcome to the show, Eric.
Thank you. I'm so honored to be here. This is a lot of fun. So as my wife, Fernanda, told you guys, this came as a request, basically, or multiple requests. So her and I were talking and figured it would be best that I came on here and talked about a lot of the questions that we were receiving. So that's what we're here to do. So I hope this serves you guys, and we're going to try and tie some of these loose ends together.
Yeah, so let's get started by talking about your background. Can you tell us what your background is and what you have been doing in the past 20 years?
Yeah, so it's pretty much been all construction. I come from a long line of contractors, whether they be roofers, home builders, carpenters, electricians, all the way out to the outside heavy equipment operators. When I was younger, I thought I was going to be an astronaut, which turned into a pilot. And because going to school to be a pilot and then paying for the hours was so expensive, I turned to construction, some entrepreneur endeavors, but mostly construction since a very early age. I mean, even when I was a kid, I was out on jobs doing things with my family. I was very hesitant at first, but now I'm very happy to be in this because we've been able to slow flip a lot of homes, do a lot of things in our own house, and got into this, the healthy home aspect. Basically, it was an accident because Fernanda got sick in the house, and we had to figure out how to fix that. After we had searched, through the medical tests and all the other avenues we explored, we ended up finding out that it was the home that was making us sick, and a lot of things that we had done to the home. And so really it was not on purpose, it was on accident.
Yeah, so can you tell the audience, how did you end up finding out that was the house that was making us sick and not something else? How did you come to that conclusion?
So remember when I'll go all the way back, because this is a very big aspect of being healthy in the home. Just to kind of give you guys a little heads up, today we're really going to focus on air and water. Then we're going to get into a little bit of mold, but let's go all the way back to water. So before we had our first child, in the back of my head, I just thought maybe it'd be a good idea, since he's going to be bathing so much and our water didn't taste very good, that we should have a water filtration system. So after about a year of looking into that, we bought a system from, I think it was all the way back in Michigan, and hooked it up to the house. Big aha moment. Nobody liked the taste of it. And We did have a whole house filter though, so it was filtering a lot of the stuff coming in. And what that means is it's basically intercepting the water from the street, or let's say you had a well, before it gets into the house. So that was doing a lot, but we still hadn't figured out the taste. So yeah, we started with water. That was so basically what happened is we moved to a new home, and we didn't really believe in the system since we didn't have any equipment to measure it at the time. And our biggest indicator was taste, and it didn't taste great. In the back of my head, I'm like, oh, I don't think this is doing anything. Moved into our new home. We brought the equipment to the house. It sat in the garage for about 6 months. And during that time, if you remember this, I'm sure you do, Noah got, well, he has eczema. And so he started getting a lot of flare-ups from that. We didn't know he had eczema until he started getting these flare-ups. That happened. Then Fernanda's sister, Fabiana, was visiting us. Her hair was just a frizzy mess. Her skin was itching. We had a lot of issues with water. Right about the time that we were getting really frustrated, we were, I don't know if you want to talk about what they prescribed for Noah to cure his eczema?
Yeah, so we took Noah to the pediatrician, who prescribed him steroids to apply twice a day in his whole body. It was not just a spot, twice a day on the whole body.
Yeah, so I looked at the ingredients. I showed her. I said, heck no. I didn't go to the pediatrician that time. She brought it home, and I said, this is steroids. We're not going to put steroids on a boy that's a year and a half old, whatever he was at the time. There's got to be a better way. So we started looking into that. Right about that time, I had not told anybody, but I said, you know what, let's just hook up this water filtration equipment. We were finally getting all the belongings out of the garage. I hooked it up, and a couple things happened. One, Fernanda's sister's hair changed, as far as it was almost like she was washing her hair with conditioner. She was super happy. No more itchy skin. Noah's eczema went away. And now I say went away, you're always going to have eczema. It's just something that you have. But the flare-ups, all of the visible signs and the irritation were gone. We didn't put 2 and 2 together until all of these things started happening, and we realized, oh my goodness, it's the water. So that was our biggest aha moment for the water, and like, oh my gosh. So that was protecting us right there. And then we started learning about a little bit more of the details about water. Like, for example, when you're running your dishwasher, the vapors that come off of that and the chemicals that are in the water to keep it safe, and the piping, which can be removed once it gets to the house. That chlorine or chloramine, now a much stronger version of it, they're mixing ammonia with it. It basically vaporizes in the shower. You're breathing it in. It's getting on your skin, which is your largest organ. And as we've talked about in this show, just about every speaker has talked about these little small things. So the water was the biggest thing. And then we figured out the taste a little bit after that. And that was another great moment. So I call it the 1-2 punch. You get it when it comes into the home, and then you have further refinement for when you drink and you cook. And how do you like the taste of our water now?
So we had people tasting the water. So we had waters from different bottles, even expensive waters. And we had people tasting without knowing which water it was. And all of them chose our water over any other water. Water tastes really sweet and at the same time very light. Everybody loves the water. Now with that, there was also a lot of issues, right? Like where you start buying the water out of filtration systems out there, start cutting that open and start looking into what was inside and what was doing, testing. Can you talk a little bit about what you found and why did you think that was important to create a customized system?
Absolutely. So once we got a system that worked, right about that time, I was watching some videos from Dr. Pompa, which actually I had seen a year or two before that. and he recommended a company that I found, and by the grace of God, they were right down the street from us, a couple of miles away. And I found a mentor, a guy that's been in water treatment for about 50 years. He's built systems for NASA, Coca-Cola. Like how I said NASA. Now I've got the Brazilian accent going. The guy is just straightforward, and he cleared up a lot of myths and false beliefs that I had around the whole alkaline fad and a bunch of other things. And we ended up finally adopting reverse osmosis. So we found out, as many of you guys are probably already aware, I mean, there's something in the news every day around a different chemical in the water. And I firmly believe now, after doing all the research and then finally doing, that was the other one. We started doing lab tests, and we started sending our water out to certified labs and finding out what was actually in the water. And we found, as we've talked about in the show, the EWG, which shows the levels that are safe on the city report, but then they show what the actual health problems are when you're at other levels. Like, for example, lead, there's no safe level of lead. Mercury, there is no safe level of mercury, things like that. So the biggest thing is the municipalities, the people that treat your water, are doing an amazing job. They're doing everything that they can, but unfortunately there's a lot of stuff getting through, and I'm not going to really get into the details of that. More so of how we got into this is we fixed it for ourselves. We couldn't find anything out there. Like you said, I started buying systems, cutting them open, sending their stuff to a lab, because I found this, just like ourselves, we were so frustrated. It's like, who do you trust? What information is correct? So I found a mentor. I found systems that worked. And then when we finally figured it out ourselves, we started introducing it to our customers, just because I was so excited about it. It's kind of like when you see a good movie or something, you want to tell people. We just started offering it to people, and it took off. And a lot of the criteria that I had for what makes a good system and what I was looking for, I couldn't find anywhere else. So I basically developed it all myself.
Yeah, so water was one of the aspects, right? And can you please explain like the different types of, let's say, for example, we had one of the question it was that somebody submitted was, okay, I have a whole house water filtration system. Do I need a garden filter?
Yeah, that's a interesting question. So you need somebody like us to either, now you've got the virtual environment where we could do something over the phone, and we've had a lot of customers. I can tell you stories where I've helped people over the phone, but generally you're going to need to be in person for something like that, because it really depends on, if you have a filtration system, is the water that you're putting into your garden connected to that? So if you're tapping off of the back side of your house with a hose bib, hose connection off your wall, most definitely, if you've got a whole house system, it's coming off of that. But if it's coming off of your irrigation or further away from your house, there's a good chance it's probably not.
Okay. And that question came because this lady, she has her organic garden, and she has been using her her hose, the water from the backyard to water her plants and her herbs and her vegetables, which right now we know that pesticides and pharmaceutical waste, all of that, it's coming into the water supply. Is that possible to filter those things out?
Pesticides and things like that? Absolutely. One thing I've heard before, I'm sure some of you guys have heard this as well, is it's not just the food you eat, it's what your food is eating. So when you're watering your vegetables, even if you've got organic vegetables, absolutely, water is probably the biggest thing that's allowing that fruit to grow, especially if you've got a juicy type of vegetable or fruit like an orange or a tomato. I mean, it's like 80% water. So yes, it is possible to remove those. Is absolutely important and necessary if you've got an herb or a small vegetable garden, or even something robust. I don't know if you know, Uh, it's so funny talking to you because you know everything. So remember the customers that we have, we're now getting into the growing industry. We're helping growers. There's a few elements that are very important for indoor growers, which is water, light, and the right air. So water is absolutely necessary. And think about this too, is water treatment is nothing new. And there's different types of water treatment. For example, we've had somebody here with the cosmetic industry. Water has to be a certain consistency for that. They use it for all types of different things. So for drinking and for gardening, there's different types. So yes, we have one for our gardening, specifically for gardening.
Okay, now what about water filtration testing? There's a lot of free tests that you get at your home. There's some tests that you can order online, and there's some third-party lab tests. What is the difference between them?
Yeah, so unfortunately, the water industry is riddled with bogus products and misinformation. And the water tests that you're generally going to see that are quote unquote free are basically like a dog and pony magic show. How do I know that? Because I've been on sales calls where I was just kind of pretending I was a relative or a friend and seen what they do. And it's basically a way to get into your house and sell you something. I won't say that for everybody, but that's the general consensus and what I've seen out there. And so why we don't do our own testing anymore is because the equipment that you need has to be calibrated frequently. It's very expensive. It's very cost prohibitive. It's basically a business in and of itself. You're talking like tens of thousands of dollars, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars to accurately test water all the time. So the best way to do that is to send it somewhere. And we send it to 2 different places. And one of them's a little bit closer depending on what we're testing for. And there's different types of tests. And if you've got a well, a city water supply. But yeah, a lab test is always recommended. There's 2 other ways you can find out what's going on with your water. So the city always does a test. It's always a year out. So like right now we're in 2020. So we'll be getting 2019's test. You can go on to whoever you're paying for your water. If you're renting, if you own, just find out, look at the bill, go online, and they've got a free annual PDF file that you can download. And then I highly recommend checking that against the EWG. You just we can send this link, you put your zip code in there, and it's going to pull up what is going on in your neighborhood and what's the real story with your water. So that's something you could do for free, but we always recommend the lab test, a third-party lab.
So we have the whole house water filtration system, and there's also the reverse osmosis, right? So what kind of systems, when somebody's looking to buy a water filtration system, what kind of questions should they ask to the person that's going to help them out? What are the concerns they should have when shopping for a water filtration system, either the whole house or a reverse osmosis?
Yeah, it's a great question. And my goodness. So let's talk about the elements inside of the systems. One of the most common systems you're going to see out there in your home advertisements that you get in the mail, and I would say 8 out of 10 companies are selling something like this. It's a really large tank. It's usually silver. It's got a mechanical head on top, and it's got like a little digital readout. And most of those units backflush, which you don't need if you're on city water. They're full of carbon, which is great, but it only lasts 3 years. So you need to ask them what's inside of it. And then, as we've talked about, and we're here to help you guys too, but you need to find out how long those, we call it media, how long that filtration media inside there that's doing the work is going to last. For example, that big tank, a lot of the people say, oh, this is going to just sit here. It's a one size fits all. That's the other thing. Is it a one size fits all? If you've got hard water, meaning scale buildup, are they using a salt-based system? There's technology out right now where you do not need salt, you do not need electricity, and you do not need something for the whole house that backflushes if you are not on a well, meaning you're pulling the water out of the ground right next to your house or in your neighborhood. I would say just about 95 to 99% of everybody in California is on a city supplied water. So that was our criteria. Is it using electricity? Does it backflush? Now backflushing is, and how much and how often. So salt-based systems, and then the regenerating systems, that's just a whole house filter that's not addressing the hard water where you would need a water softener. Those can blow out, meaning eject 50 to 70 gallons 1 to 2 times a week. Now in California, that's a huge problem. If they plummet into a drain, that's quite a bit of water waste. And then if they blow it onto your lawn, most of our soil is clay here, you're just going to create a flood, or it's going down your driveway. That's what I've seen, and that's what I would highly avoid. And then how is it going to be maintained?
Okay.
Those are really important questions to ask on the whole house, meaning the one that's intercepting the water as it comes from the street.
Okay, and some cities here are not even allowed salt-based anymore. You're not allowed to have salt-based on your water filtration systems.
That's correct. Our HOA, for example, it is banned. It's right in there because ejecting salt onto soil is a pollutant, and injecting it down the drain, it's pollution. So yeah, we need to stop using that. There's way better ways, much better ways, of conditioning. So here's a term that we need to clear up. So there's conditioning and there's softening when we're talking about addressing hard water issues. And why is this important? Hard water basically calcifies and clogs up your pipes and turns them into a tiny little hole. What it also does is make your laundry harder to clean. Your dishwasher can cake up, your faucets, your fixtures. It's basically a nuisance. What is hard water? It's calcium and magnesium. It's healthy. It's great, right? So just as a lot of our speakers have brought up, there's no perfect solution. There's pros and cons to all of this stuff. So now you've got water conditioning. So if you get rid of softening, which is salt, you can use salt or potassium. If you go to conditioning, and this is where we really get into some bogus products, but the guy that we're working with has a patent on a device that basically separates the hardness molecules from the water, meaning it's not going to attach to your fixtures and create those nuisances long enough. It's 72 hours basically where it suspends it in there. And it basically does the same thing, and the calcium and magnesium is still in the water, actually.
Mm-hmm. And that can be put back again in the water later on if you have another system that is the drinking system, right?
Correct. Yeah, so that's the 1-2 punch. Unless you have a whole house reverse osmosis system, let's say you're immune compromised. This is all about this show, right? Let's say you're suffering from some serious illness. In some cases, a whole house reverse osmosis system makes sense, but it generally is something we're not going to recommend because even at very low rejection rates, the reverse osmosis relies on wastewater. So it's a 1-to-1 ratio, even at the lowest, meaning most families are going to use 200 to 300 gallons a day on average. So you're going to waste that much water as well. So that generally doesn't work. But in most homes, like where we are, got city supplied water, you're going to get something that's hitting the house. It's at the front of the house. Ours, for example, is in the garage, intercepts all the water. So the whole house is getting it, but it can only do so much, meaning it's not going to get rid of pharmaceuticals. It's not going to lower what's called TDS, total dissolved solids. That's what makes water taste good. If you have that level very high, it's just not going to taste good. That's why bottled water tastes great. The water that goes into Starbucks, or if you've ever had water that tastes good, the total dissolved solids, TDS, is very low, like 100 or under. And so a whole house system is not going to do that. And there's other things that's not going to do. So the reverse osmosis also lowers everything it removes basically 99.99% of everything that's still left in your water. And then thinking outside the box, how long has your piping been in your house? So even though you're hitting it at the the garage, for example, then the water is going and it's touching the plumbing that's in the house. If it's not a new home, you still got that to deal with. So that's what's nice about having a reverse osmosis system to further refine the water. And then we have, I know this is going to come up, reverse osmosis is not good for you. We thought the same thing. We believe a little different now. And what we've done is we've remineralized the water with calcium and magnesium. We've played around a lot with that, as you know, with the alkalinization, and there's all kinds of other add-ons you can do. But the biggest driving force for us is it clean? Is it safe? And for the water that you drink, does it taste good? And so that's what we master.
Okay, so with that, what was the other point about finding that the house was actually making us sick? What was the other aha moment that for us, pointed out back to the house as a source of toxins?
Yeah, so this is a very important one. The water, I think we got lucky on that one early because we didn't get sick from that. We actually got sick from creating an energy efficient home and closing ourselves up into a box. So over the years, Fernanda and I have slow flipped some homes together. Fernanda being an architect and me as a contractor, we've had a lot of fun and we're able to do a lot of things, and we've enjoyed that. And one of the unfortunate things that happened was we really, really messed up our indoor air quality. And this is going to open up Pandora's box, and we'll try to basically put it into some very easy to understand and user-friendly terminology here. So what did we do in our home? We took out we moved into an existing home that was about 30 years old. So we ripped out everything in the house. We replaced the windows with windows that didn't leak. They created a great seal. We ripped out all of the flooring, and then we put down glue and all kinds of chemicals in the house. We put paint on the walls. We go on and on and on what we did. And then we closed up the house, did all the energy sealing because we want to save electricity. We put an air conditioner in, and that's when you started getting sick. And I was out of the house working most of the time, and you were the one that suffered the most. You just had a kid, and so you really felt it. And you're in an office, which we can talk about later. But yeah, go ahead.
So with that, what happened too is that with the air conditioner, it was summertime and air conditioning running nonstop, a new baby, and the headaches started nonstop every single day, all day long. I'm very strong for pain. I had 2 C-sections, almost emergency C-sections. And what happened is I was able to deal with that pain, not taking any drugs for the surgery, but the headaches were killing me every single day. I was not able, I basically felt like I was handicapped. And going from one doctor to another, they're always telling me, oh, here's some prescription drugs for your headache. Nobody asked me anything. And I kept saying, why is that, why am I having these headaches every single day? What's going on? None of them could actually tell me why, other than just giving me the pill. And it was very hard. And I know that a lot of people in the show, it's going to understand what I'm saying. And I hope a lot of the spouses can also understand that we're not creating or searching for attention. It's just that you become that person that you have no energy. I would get up at 9 o'clock in the morning, like if I had just came back home from a party. I couldn't get things done because my energy level was low. I couldn't focus. I couldn't do anything the way I used to do before. I became the ill, the sick, and the complainer, because every time somebody invited me to go somewhere else, I just couldn't put myself together to go. So we also, when we were finished with the floor, I decided to redecorate the house, right? With new furniture, new area rugs, new pillows, new throw blankets. And that's when Eric had the first symptom, which was like, he would come home and say, my eyes are bleeding, like basically like burning and red. And he started itching like the back of his throat. And, just like, there's something in this house that's making me sick. But I was here all day long. And probably coming from a country, coming from Brazil, where I grew up, and I was raised in a house with all the doors open all the time. We have tiles. The house is cleaned every single day. I have never been in the same environment that now I was. And that's when we started going to Las Vegas to remodel one of our houses there. And after 3 or 4 days there, we would come back home. We would feel much better, get up before the alarm clock went off, and energy level much higher. Would come back home and then dragged again into that same position where we're just like, I have zero energy. And then I don't know how many times did it take for us to kind of realize that.
Yeah, that's the human nature aspect, right? So I want to touch on one thing. It took a few times to answer your question, but I'm trying to remember that. But the biggest thing, and one of the biggest reasons why we did this show, is the strain and the stress that it puts on a relationship and a family when somebody, it's usually the woman, is suffering. It could be the way the woman's body is made up, like having a kid. The environment's changing, but a lot of times women spend more time at home. A lot of them are doing work from home now. It's so sad. And, I take full responsibility for this. It wasn't until I started feeling sick myself, and this doesn't always happen for couples, that I finally said, something is wrong with our house. So as Fernanda explained, we would go away to Las Vegas, totally different climate. The house was completely vacant. We didn't have any of the things that we had in that house. Even though the house was dirty, it wasn't closed up like a box. There was a large buffer of air in there. We didn't have all of these things that we have in our own home. And literally what happened to me is, like she said, my eyes were always itching. I had allergies that I never had. And then the biggest one was, as she mentioned, we would go to Vegas. We would work until, midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, wake up 6 o'clock in the morning. Didn't even need coffee. We're just ready to go. And every time we came back, and we were doing this for 3 months, going back and forth. It's crazy to think of the things we've done together. But when we would come back home, that's when I started feeling like a truck ran over me in the morning. Whether I got 4 hours of sleep, 6 hours of sleep, 8 hours of sleep, didn't matter. It felt like we partied like crazy, drank, did whatever. Just partied our brains out. And we weren't. We were just doing our normal everyday life. And so that's when I said, okay, there's something wrong. And that's when I started looking into it. And that's what we'll talk about here in a second.
Yeah. So one of the things that Eric did in the house, can you talk about the indoor air quality? Because everything we did, and if you have been watching the show, you have seen the same patterns about all the things that we bring into the house and they evaporate. We had speakers talking about furniture, about mattresses, about fabric, about cleaning products, about so many things, even like the windows, right? Vinyl around the windows. So there's beauty products that we bring into your house, perfume, so much. So that really lowered our indoor air quality. And can you talk a little bit about the solutions for indoor air quality, what you know about it, and what people should be looking into as a sign or things that they can do to actually improve their indoor air quality?
Yeah. So this has been mentioned on the show before, but we'll say it again. If you're experiencing headache, fatigue, um, allergies that you never had before, um, just really symptoms where you don't feel like yourself, brain fog, that's another big one too. So the first thing that we did once I started trying to figure out what was going on is I started taking some classes online with the EPA, and they were talking about there's now what's considered a pollutant, and I've seen this in the commercial. So let me take you to the commercial construction for a minute. You cannot build an office or a school without fresh air coming into the building and a little device on the wall showing how many parts per million the CO2, which you exhale, carbon dioxide in a building. You cannot be above 1,000 before the mechanical system, meaning the heating and air conditioning equipment, turns on and brings in fresh air. Plus, the equipment's always bringing in fresh air, so they've had that right for a long time. They have other issues, but in a home, what's happened, especially on an existing home, is the CO2 levels when you close up a home and you're not allowing it to breathe and bringing fresh air back into the house. That's what happened to us. And so the first pollutant that I found was elevated levels of carbon dioxide from not having any fresh air in the house. So safe levels, they've gone up quite a bit. The planet, I think, used to be around 250 or 300. It's just a meter that registers parts per million. That's fresh outside air. That's the level of carbon dioxide mixed in with the oxygen in the air. Our home, while we were sleeping, I had a little alarm on it. You can buy a device that shows you this. It's really simple to do. We were 1,600, sometimes 2,000 parts per million inside of our house. Now, again, you got to take the power into your own hand. If you look at the EWG or anybody concerned about health, the government says 1,000 is okay, but why wouldn't you want to be what nature is at 350, 400 now? So that's what I wanted in the house for us. And once we fixed that by bringing fresh air into the house, that helped a lot. It didn't fix everything, but that was a big first step.
Yeah, so that actually, the headaches start going away. Just right after we start implementing bringing fresh air into the house, that's when the headaches start going away. Now, you brought out a good point, which is, how in the commercial building, things are being put in a different way than in the home, and about measuring levels. Let's talk about building codes. What have you seen in the industry about minimum levels of, the minimum requirements, and what you think about when you are in a job site or you're doing your air quality measurements? What do you see the problem is?
The problem is pretty much like everything else is you take everything with a grain of salt. I think they mean well. Nobody's trying to hurt anybody. But a lot of times what is written down and put into the code isn't fully thought out. For example, number one, existing home, you're not remodeling, you're not building a new home, existing home like ours, you do energy upgrades. There's no code right now saying you have to bring fresh air in. That's only on new construction. But in new construction, the amount of air that they're saying needs to be in the building, in my opinion, from the readings that I've done and seeing the measurements, it's not enough. Another thing that's happening too, so there's three ways you can bring fresh air into your house. One, you can open up the windows, which takes quite a long time to exchange that air, meaning bringing in the fresh air to replace that stale air. That takes a long time. And sometimes it doesn't even make sense in the middle of summer or winter, depending on where you live, especially. The next one would be a whole house fan. And so that's another problem that we're having here. So whole house fans are a great idea. It just brings a massive amount of air from outside rushing into your home. You eject it into the attic, and then it bleeds out through the roof. In a perfect world, that would be great. Well, the sizing of that. Where I see an error on that is right now on new construction. Luckily, they've finally said, hey, you have to have one of these in your home, even if you have an air conditioner. People use these to economize the air conditioner. That's the whole point. It wasn't even a health thing. It's about saving electricity. The challenge with those is the minimum requirements. What do I mean by that? So 1 cubic foot of air movement in a square, 1 cubic foot per minute is the code per square foot. Where when we started putting them in, I didn't notice that they worked or did anything with all the equipment and all of the levels we were checking until you get into the 2.5 or really 3 CFM per square foot, when you just basically are sizing the equipment. I don't want to get too crazy on that, but you see what I'm saying? It's like, it's really off. So 1, it's not going to give you the cooling you want. And 2, it's not going to do anything. You're just wasting electricity. It's just like spinning its wheels. So whole house fans and then bringing fresh air into the house, those are a big missing gap in the industry right now.
Yeah, so that brings a good point, because when we are designing a house, we rely on the codes. And as you're saying, I think we just need to have a little bit more knowledge that about the building, about the whole building when we're looking at the codes, because they don't mean any harm, but at the same time, the minimum codes for a lot of the things are not enough to create a healthy home. Right? It's enough to pass the inspections, but are not enough to create a healthy home. And if this is something you need to look into those issues ahead of time. The other challenge, what else do you see as far as challenges in the industry when working with contractors? You have a lot of experience with mechanical equipment. And I noticed that a lot of the times clients treat the mechanical equipment as an appliance, right? And what are the challenges that you see in the industry when working with architects, interior designers, contractors? What do you see as far as industry challenges?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And Fernanda and I have had a lot of talks about this, because there's a big gap in the whole process of building a home. And what do I mean by that? It's the very beginning. Let's say you're building a new home. When you're consulting with your architect, when the architect is talking to the engineer, that is the time. And luckily, Fernanda's worked with some architects. It's changing. There's very few out there, but bringing in the mechanical early on, or the smart home technology, or there's a lot of things. I actually spoke at an event called Tech Home X, and the reason why I was there was to talk in front of all these people that were having the same challenge of coming in too late in the project. And then you're in a rush. 1, you don't have the budget for it. 2, a lot of times you don't even have the room. So for example, going to the mechanical stuff, for example, the stuff that we have to put in a home to make it, work properly, the codes have changed there too. And all of the piping is basically like doubled in size. The equipment is doubled in size to get the efficiency. So when you come in really late on the project, you've got a lot of challenges there. It might not even happen, or you might end up having other equipment in its place that is not very aesthetically pleasing, meaning it does not look nice on the wall, meaning the ductless systems. You might only be able to put those in. I just was on a project where they had these tiny little systems all over their house on every single one of their walls, because the roof was slammed down. There was no room there. They had no mechanical closet, meaning a place to put it. California, we don't have basement, so there was no place to put any of this equipment. So it's either 1, you don't have anything, which you have to have at least heating here. That's the code. So what are you going to do? You're left with not a lot of choices, or you go and just really blow your budget and put radiant heat all over your flooring, which is really expensive.
Yeah, so for somebody that's out there right now and they need to hire a person to put their air conditioner, what are the things they need to take in consideration for people that are, sensitive, have a lot of allergies? One of the issues that we see is when people put some of the equipment in the attic, they don't seal completely, they still breathe in the air in. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so let's talk about what we did to our equipment and why, and what we started seeing in the industry. So when I say I'm a mechanical contractor, I got a lot of experience in different areas, but I've concentrated on mechanical. And for the customer, the homeowner, that means that anything that has to do with water and air in your home is where I have focused most of my experience in the construction industry. So for the heating and air conditioning system, there's two times that you're going to experience these things, and these are the areas that I've seen problems kind of different in both. I think most of the people listening are going to experience, not everybody's going to be building their home, and if they do, it's already in there. So let's talk about, really focus on the people that are replacing their equipment. And you also talked about an appliance. So your heating and air conditioning system is way more than an appliance. So that's the biggest takeaway. It's not like a refrigerator where you plug it in and you just put it there, or a dishwasher where it's a little bit more complicated. You just put it in and it's there. And the efficiencies make sense because it's an all-in-one unit. So heating and air conditioning is really challenging for somebody that lives in a home that doesn't know anything about it, because it's all hidden inside of the walls. The tubes that the air goes through, we call ducting, the pieces of the equipment. If you've got air conditioning, some of it's outside, you might see that. And you say, oh, that's the air conditioner. And when you replace it, you just replace that piece. It's so far beyond that. It really takes an engineer's mind to put a system together properly. And what do I mean by that? It's the size of the tubes. It's the size of the lines that go to the equipment outside. It's all the care when you're putting these tubes together so they're not pulling in. Like you said, some people have these in their attic, some have them in their basement. Most people have heating and air conditioning equipment, the indoor portion of it, in a place that you're not going to want to breathe that air. It's either under your house, it's in a gross closet, it's up in your attic, it's in an area that is not an area that you want to be breathing that air. And so on the company side of things, that the people that manufacture this equipment, what I've seen is there's materials inside that you don't want to be breathing. There's holes all over the equipment that need to be sealed. There's, it's a monumental task to put a system together that works well. And the challenge in California or other temperate climates is when you put these things in and they quote unquote work, if you were to see a well-designed system versus something that was just kind of haphazardly thrown together, you wouldn't really know the difference unless you were to kind of graph them out over time. It seems like it's working, but you just don't know how well. And then we see things, you've seen these pictures, when we go into these homes, when we're replacing equipment, we're dealing with people breathing insulation. We're dealing with people breathing fumes and dirt and who knows what under a home, just from basically poor craftsmanship. Heating and air conditioning is a craft and it requires a lot. And so there's two things to kind of, as an analogy, and think about next time you watch HGTV, look and look and look and look, because you'll never find it. They never talk about the heating and air conditioning equipment. They talk about countertops. They talk about floors, all the fun things that we see. And it's great, but the heating and air conditioning system can make you sick. And it made us sick, and it's making other people sick. And it's something that'll do it over time. And there's some other things people don't think about. The heating and air conditioning system can burn your house down. It can flood your house, and it can also poison you by carbon monoxide. And that's why you need an inspector from the city to come out after they've done their work to make sure that they've done it properly and get it inspected annually. Even if it's the electric company, they'll come out usually for free, just make sure everything's still safe.
Yeah, there's like one of our clients that their daughter was, developed serious allergies and very like sick after they moved into the house. And one of the things that happened when Eric was there is that when the person that was installing the air conditioner before, probably they didn't have the right size, the right parts. And I don't even think they mean, anything harmful, but sometimes they're in a hurry. They don't have time to go buy that part. And because they don't have that holistic approach, and that's why we have been talking about this whole time during this show, it's about a mission. It's about working with people that know, that have that mentality, that they understand that this could, in the end, hurt somebody. Then if you don't have enough knowledge to ask the right questions, you are just going to be working with people that are doing their best to what they know. So this girl, when Eric went there, that probably they didn't have the right size, the ducts, but they tried to make it work. But when, the ducts expand and contract, that tape kind of came off and it was full of poop, rat poop inside. So after that was all cleaned up and properly sized and everything done right, that girl's allergy went away. She felt better. So the point is, it's so important for you to have the knowledge to ask the right questions, to understand, we have seen there's so much that goes into the house, and the air conditioner is just not an appliance that goes there. There's all the equipment that goes with that. The other thing too is even inside of your walls, the air travels inside of your wall and comes down to your baseboard. So your light fixtures, there are holes in your ceiling that probably, if you don't have the proper pressure, you could be pressuring all that air from the attic into the house or through the walls and down to the basement. So can you please talk a little bit about humidity, especially now that we are in this time where the coronavirus is happening? There's so many people that are staying home. Can you talk a little bit about indoor air quality and with the humidity, and what people could do right now to improve their air quality?
Yes, absolutely. Before I get into humidity, I just wanted to touch on something you said, which is really important and made me think about really thinking things through. For example, whole house fans. You mentioned pressurizing and having air coming through the lights. So in our home, when we put in a whole house fan, I calculated all of the venting that needed to be installed in your home, which did not exist. Many homes do not have enough relief air from the attic because you're pressurizing the attic with a ton of air. If that air doesn't have a place to go, that air is going to make its way back down into your house. It's going to come in through your light sockets, your fixtures. I mean, it's basically going to make its way into your home. And again, that's air that you don't want. So another thing to think about when you're getting a whole house fan, make sure the company is sizing the venting or inspecting the venting on the roof. Absolutely. So humidity is a big one. And that was another aha moment for us, especially when we had mold. So this has been brought up in the show. You can look it up. This is something that's been established very well by science for a long time. There is a safe level of humidity. Again, there's nothing perfect. That's why they give you a range. Between 30% humidity and 50% humidity is the safe range. And why? And you can look up a graph, and we can even post that graph in here. Once you start traveling outside of those ranges, as you mentioned with health, what happens for our health? Why does everybody get sick in the winter? And the coronavirus is like a flu-like symptom, right? So the lower end of the spectrum of humidity, let's say you're in a place, high desert, Las Vegas, for example, winter in general, a lot of cold, dry areas. In the wintertime, things start getting colder, the humidity drops, and then you add a furnace to it, which really dries out the air. You get into a condition where viruses just love to thrive. You are creating a playground for them. And then your nasal passages can crack, your mucous membrane opens up, and then you basically just open the gates of your immune system to all of these bugs. So that's the low end of the spectrum. And there's more to this too. I'm just going to focus on that right now. So if you want to stay healthy, stay in the 30 to 50. Viruses on the low end, and there's more too. Then on the opposite end, which we had an issue with, is too much humidity in the house. And that's where bacteria and mold love to grow 60% and above. So even if you don't have a leak, if you're keeping your home at a level of humidity that's too high and you've got food sources in there, like wallpaper maybe, or anything that's collecting that moisture, you're basically creating an environment for mold to thrive. So just remember that 30 to 50, and you can buy anywhere from $14 on Amazon up to something really robust, a meter that you put in your house. If you got 2 stories, do one upstairs, downstairs. Humidity is going to balance itself out in the house anyways if it's all connected, but at minimum get one, and keep the between 30 and 50. How do you fix it? A dehumidifier, or if you got an area like Vegas where it's too dry, you can actually have a humidifier where you actually add humidity to the house and keep it at those safe levels.
Yeah, so again, we talked about air, water, humidity. We talked about the building industry air conditioners. What are the places that we have seen that could fixing one problem could actually create another problem, or areas where, you know, what we see right now is that there are a lot of people that specialize in things, and it's when you ask somebody to come to your home and do some kind of work, they understand that part really well. But when it comes to the whole building, or how this part connects or affects other part of the building or the home, they don't understand. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm trying to think of, let's talk about the mold example. Yeah, I think what you're trying to say, and I think what we've really come to realize, something we were doing already, which we didn't know we were doing, and it's a big part of this show why we've had such a diverse group of speakers, is it's a holistic approach. You have to think about everything that's going on in the house. And a lot of people, even in a specific trade, only are focused on one thing or know how to do one thing. So let's talk about this mold story. A great friend of ours got basically deathly ill, almost died from toxic mold in his house, and did like an $80,000 remediation. And these people were good at one thing, but they didn't really know about all of the aspects of the mechanical parts in a house. And what happened is at the very end, they were signing off. They had like somebody looked up in the corner of the garage, and there was a tiny speck. What is that? Opened it up a little bit more, and they found the mother load, which was about a 10-foot diameter spiral colony of mold growing from a dryer vent inside of the wall that had been condensing because it's hot. And the temperature difference, like imagine like a can of Coke when or a beer, you set it on there, and that temperature difference hits the dew point, starts sweating. That pipe was sweating for decades and creating enough moisture inside the wall, probably venting heat inside the wall too. And that mold traveled all the way up the garage wall, all the way up to the second story, and was just basically bombarding him with, there were mycotoxins coming out and a number of other things. And yeah, so they basically had to start from square one again. And it's a challenge. And that's what we have basically excelled at, is we have the ability to approach things on many different levels. And I think that's really what it takes today. And if you have somebody else that you hire, see how open they are to inviting other people into the big picture, so to speak, too, because it's not just one thing. Usually it's a multitude of problems, and everybody's different. And we've brought this up over and over again.
Yeah, and mold can also hide in your air conditioner and your ducts. There are so many places where mold could hide. And if you have somebody that is doing mold remediation for you, and they don't understand the mechanicals or everything about the house, that could be an issue. So for example, let's just talk about what happened to our house. We had mold remediation done, and the very next day when we moved into our home, the very next day, they installed some panels on the roof, and it rained a lot. So what happened is Eric looks up and he sees that little, yellow spot on the ceiling, and that was leaking from the roof. Now, if he didn't understand how, what a yellow spot means, which probably I would not have known that many years ago, it would just be something that you would look at it and not care about, and that would be a potential place for growing mold. So it's just one of those things that at this point, I think everybody should know a little bit, at least what signs, something that happens in your house. What are the signs that I need to be looking for? There's a yellow spot on my ceiling. Well, that could be potentially be a water leak, and maybe I should look into that, right? So it's just having this open mind to different areas of the house. The house has all of those parts, and they all work together. You change something here, it could be affecting something else here, like dual panel windows. Well, that's awesome, but now it's affecting another part of my house, which is indoor air quality, right? Oh, we have a whole house fan. Also, I'm fixing that because I'm bringing fresh air. I'm circulating the air. Well, it's not pressurized correctly. So now it's bringing all that dirt air inside of my house. So now I'm breathing that. So there's so many parts of a house that we just need to understand at least the basics, so that we are more educated when an issue happens. We are ready to ask the right questions and bring the right person in.
Yeah. I didn't want to forget this because you had said something about doing more harm than good. And that's always at the top of our minds when we approach any of these things. So just really quick on water, for example, when you buy a very large tank that you see in all these magazines, like I mentioned, if that carbon inside of there that's doing most of the work is not changed in 2 to 3 years, when it no longer works and it's full, the carbon starts to break down. And one, it releases everything it's been collecting back into the house, and two, little shards of the carbon. So you're trying to do the right thing, you put this in, and yet if it's not maintained properly, you have more problems than you had originally. So going to the air, this is where I really wanted to get into, is we've had a lot of questions about air filtration. So I wanted to bring up a couple of things about that. First of all, you need to understand that air filtration only solves one of like 5 to 7 different problems with your air. And what do I mean by that? Particulates, imagine little tiny, could be pet dander, our dander, any particles in the air, they get into the nasal passages. Some of them, if they're small enough, get deep into the lungs. A filter is only going to catch those things. And that's one of many things that we mentioned: humidity, then you've got CO2, then you've got VOCs. Okay, so the filter is only going to catch the particulates. Now, they have some that claim that they do other things where they filter down to another level, but then you can get into another problem. Takeaway for you guys here: if you've got 2 filters in your furnace, 2 different places, it's one only, because another thing that you could do is filter too much or not change your filter. That's a great takeaway as well. If you haven't changed your filter in a while, change it immediately, especially right now, and run your fan as much as you can to help clean up the air. But if you don't put the right filter in there, or something that puts a drag on the system, if you're running air conditioning, you can actually freeze up part of the equipment, and it'll just keep running and running. You think it's on, turns into a block of ice. That block of ice can create a flood in your house. So you really need to know what you're doing when you're putting these filters in. The filter that we like and that we usually recommend is from a company that makes equipment called Lennox, and they have a Carbon Clean 16. They've done a lot of research on how to catch the most amount of particles without putting a drag on the system. And that's very important. So you're trying to catch that. And then this has also been brought up too, talking about mold. If you're collecting mold on one side of that filter, that thing needs to be thrown away at some point, because right when you turn off that fan, the mold has an ability to come back out. Do you have mold in your house? Probably not. But if you do, as we talked about, let's say you're doing a remediation or you're doing something, let's say the company doesn't know anything about that, that's doing the mold, that's something you would need to do is remove that filter. Or if you think you are removing mold from your house, let's say you do a test and you confirm that and you're running it to help kind of keep it at bay for a while, you're going to have to remove that filter more often than normal, because it does have the ability to go back into the house backwards.
Yeah, so we could be here talking with you guys for a long time, and but we're gonna respect your time. And I hope this served you, and I hope this gave you a lot of open mind about different areas in your home and things to think about and questions to ask. And we are here to answer any questions. So you have a gift for us, right? So would you please explain what you have and how that could help the audience?
Yes, as Fernanda had mentioned, there's no way we could talk about all of this, and each one of you are going to have specific needs and wants. So we would like to offer you guys a no obligation, no pressure, free consultation, a 15-minute call where you can call me and I will talk to you and walk you through some of the things and point you in the right direction. We'll do whatever we can to help you. And not only that, as we mentioned, we do have a full line of water treatment equipment, from really simple residential things that you would use in your home all the way up to commercial systems. So on the residential side, for those of you either renting, that you own, we have a lot of systems that would be very beneficial to you, and we would like to extend 25% off any of our full systems.
So thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much for sharing all your industry experience with everybody. I always learn more when I ask questions, especially when the questions are not mine. So thank you for the audience that have been sending us so many questions, and I hope this answers some of them. And thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys. I hope this information serves you guys. If you have more questions, please reach out and give me a call. I'd love to help you.